I've been sitting on this story for a while now. It happened back when I was in high school. I'm in my 30s now for context. Also, I'm going to refrain from using my real name and all my friends' real names in the story. You can look up the place I'm about to describe online, and I don't know if we'd still get in trouble, so it's best to avoid real names just in case. In my hometown, there used to be an abandoned military base. From what I saw online, it was used primarily during the Cold War and World War II. At one point, over 200 military families were housed there. It looked like a small community. I'm sure military bases all across the country have these small communities, but it still seemed weird to me. The village was abandoned in 1984, and it was just left that way until 2014, when it was finally torn down. I remember growing up as a kid, we would always hear ghost stories about the abandoned village. I had heard every type of story you can imagine. Everything from demonic cults gathering there, to top-secret military experiments being performed deep underground. Anybody who lives in this area knows all about the abandoned village. It was almost like a lost piece of local lore. When I was in middle school, I remember my older brother coming into my room one night when I had my friends over, and he told me that they had been to the village. We didn't believe him. He described in detail what he saw. He looked genuinely scared, but I'm sure that was just part of him messing with us. He started telling us about the church and how the church had a secret door on the floor next to the altar. He told us that he could hear moans and screams coming from the church basement. After laying it on thick for a while, he finally had all of us believing him. His irrational story just added to the already mysterious lore of the abandoned village. For years, my friends and I would share stories about this place. We always said that once we were old enough to drive, we would investigate it ourselves. All through high school, we talked about exploring the village, but never went through with it. That was for two main reasons. One, we didn't really know the exact location of the village. We knew the area, but that wasn't enough to go on. We knew it was near the airport, but there's a lot of area around the airport that has no trespassing signs. And two, even though it was abandoned, it was still technically a military base. We had no idea what kind of trouble we'd be in if we got caught. On one cool spring night in our senior year of high school, one of my friends, Alex, came to us and told us that he knew where the entrance to the village was. We didn't believe him. He told us that someone he knew had been there and shared the location with him. I was so confident that he was making it up that I told him we should go and investigate. I assumed that we would never find the entrance, so that night around 11 p.m., we made the 15-minute drive to the approximate area. Alex didn't seem confident of the location. He kept telling me to pull over. Every 2 feet he'd say, "I think this is it," but it would just turn out to be nothing. Finally, we found an overgrown road. Alex claimed that this must be the path. There was a beat-up, old no trespassing sign covered by a bunch of trees. Since we had my car, I started to get nervous about going any further. Alex and my friend Nick were 100% down to keep driving forward. Getting in trouble wasn't even on their minds. They kept going back to the same argument. We'd been talking about it basically our whole lives, so let's finally do it. They eventually talked me into it. I started to slowly drive down the dirt road. I turned the lights off on my car and basically just let the car roll down the dirt path. We eventually came to one of those roadblock gates that go up and down. Obviously there was nobody at the security checkpoint, so I had to get out of the car and manually lift the gate. This is where it started to get weird. The next minute or so of driving, we could see a bunch of furniture littered on the side of the road. Beds, dressers, tables, basically anything you could think of. Then we got to another roadblock gate. This time I had Alex get out and lift the gate. After that final checkpoint, we were in the village. It was a surreal feeling. After all the years of hearing about this place, we were finally there. It looked like being in the Upside Down from Stranger Things. It was like a small neighborhood, but it just looked wrong. You could see that it was decaying. I pulled the car in front of the church. We all got out and quietly started to explore the area. The first thing I noticed was that there were no cameras anywhere that I could see. That made me feel a little better that maybe we wouldn't get caught. We went to the church first, and it was creepy. There was graffiti everywhere. I looked for the door my brother mentioned when I was a kid, and it was no surprise that there was no trapdoor. After exploring the church, we went and looked at some of the houses. It was so creepy. It was legitimate housing, and it just looked completely abandoned. Some of the housing units looked like they'd been hit by a hurricane, while others were still intact. The housing that was intact was more creepy than the messed up units. Our friend Scott was with us, and the entire time he was freaking out. He kept claiming that someone was there. Scott was always afraid of something. We kept telling him that it was just because of the nature of what we were doing, that his imagination was probably playing tricks on him. While in one of the houses, we all stopped abruptly because there was an unnatural sound. What I mean is that it didn't sound like a typical noise a house makes. I asked my friends if they had heard it, and they all had. It sounded like wood creaking, like the sound it would make if someone were walking on the wood. Instead of continuing to listen, Alex shouted asking if anyone was there, and the noise stopped. We all stood in that house for a minute trying to talk about what we had just heard. I truly didn't know. Alex and Nick were sure that it was just an old abandoned house making noises, not Scott. He was sure that we weren't alone. Either way, I told the group I wanted to leave. I had such an uneasy feeling being there, and I just wanted to go home. I could tell Alex and Nick wanted to stay. Since I drove, I told them that we were leaving. While we were heading to the front door, Scott jumped back suddenly. He quietly pointed to one of the windows on the side of the house. 3 shadows can be seen moving on the outside of the house that was next door. We all became dead silent. Those were clearly the shadows of heads that were moving just outside the window. As quietly as I could, I stepped over to the window and looked outside. I could see the shadows move just out of sight into the backyard of the house we were inside. I whispered as quietly as I could that we needed to make a run for the car. Everyone nodded. Without thinking, we all just sprinted right out the door and in the direction of my car. Once the car was in sight, Scott, who was in front of us, screamed at the top of his lungs. We all looked, and standing next to the back seat of my car was a tall woman with a disgusting old black dress on. She had the back door open, and it looked like she was about to get into the vehicle because one leg was already halfway into the back seat. When she heard Scott scream, she let go of the door and ran inside the church. We continued running towards the car. When we got there, I looked in the back seat, and thankfully, nobody was back there. We got into the car and drove off as fast as we could. I remember going so fast that I lost control on the dirt and almost crashed the car. That night, we shared stories about who we think we encountered. The most obvious answer is that those people were likely homeless in some capacity and using this abandoned facility as a shelter. All of that makes sense, except for why that woman would be trying to get inside my vehicle. It's also terrifying when I think about that night because we walked around for quite a while and never saw anybody, or even a clue that somebody had been there. Not until right before we left. Even though Scott claimed that he heard something weird, I still think that was just his imagination at that time. Years later, I started telling my girlfriend this story. She said we should look it up and see if it's still there. That's when I realized that it had been torn down in 2014. It's wild that there's so much more information on it now. Growing up, we constantly tried looking stuff up about that place, and there was nothing. Because of that, it added more to the mysterious lore of the abandoned village. I'm just happy we left when we did, and that Scott screamed when he saw the tall woman. If we had been 10 seconds later running to the car, who knows how this night could have ended.